Do you want me to stand back here?
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Charleston Antique Mall. This is the first of our 2024 free class series on vintage hat pin and hat pin holders. We would like to remind everyone to please turn off your cell phones or put them on silence, and any dealers, please silence your walkies. We want to welcome you, and I also want to let you guys know that Leslie here is going to be doing a appraisal day on the 14th from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. So please, no appointment necessary, so please come on and check that out if you have anything you need appraised. And once again, thank you for coming and joining us at Charleston Antique Mall.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Welcome. I would like questions through the whole lecture. You don't have to wait till the end. And I like to answer them as you think of them. Today's lecture is on antique hat pins and antique holders. Not so much on the holders, but you can't really mention hat pins without mentioning the holders. So I ended up collecting both. My first hat pins were an inheritance from my grandmother, and I now have over 300. Oh, wow. I'm almost embarrassed to say. But hat pins are very unique, and the reason I like them so much was they're a great view into the history of jewelry in America in the late 1800s and through the early 20th century. The hats that were prior to 1890 were considered bonnets. So they tied, and they didn't need to have a pin. The pins, as it got to the 1890s, the hats, the bonnets were old school, out of date, and the hats began to just sit on top of the hairstyles, and they needed pins to hold them on. Now, the Industrial Revolution had already happened, and so there were pin making machines. Prior to 1840, a pin had to be made by hand. So that was not very effective for selling to the masses. And if they did make pins, but they were expensive and they were all hand done. Now, it is believed that the first hat pins in the late probably the early 1890s were swords like this. They were long enough to fit through the hat and then through the hairstyle. As they got closer to the turn of the century, the hats got bigger, it got more elaborate. The hairstyles, they wore lots of hair pieces and wigs, and the hat pins had to get longer. One of the primitive kind of hat pin holders was considered a sweetheart present. This was when the young man went out and shot deer or elk or whatever he did. He'd come back with the carcass and make a pincushion for his girlfriend. And yeah, gee, thanks. A deer foot. So, of course, holders and pincushions had to come about to house these long pins. Now, they started off kind of short, and because it wasn't necessary, but by the Edwardian time, which was when Queen Victoria died and her son Edward became King of England, is when things got opulent and out of control. So in the meantime, hat pins developed to sparkly. So there was rhinestones, and rhinestone was something that the average person could afford. And you know, I did forget to bring the most basic one, which was, I'm sure you've all seen it, a little black button. And you know, I don't even think of them because they are just so nondescript. That was what a really poor lady would have had to buy at the 5 and dime to keep her hat on. But there came a time when you could go on the beach and find your shell, and there would be a stand somewhere on the beach where they would wrap up the shell that you found, and then you had a new hat pin. They had all the pins and the wires, and that was something that you did on vacation, on holiday. So here's an example of two shells, and then the shell pin cushion as well.
Was it possible that people would wear the big hats without them, or was that a necessity?
That was a necessity. And they got so large that they passed a law that it had to have a little end on it, because they were very dangerous for a woman to bend her head down on a bus or on a train, and she could, but a woman always had a weapon. She always had a weapon with her. Yeah. And they used to do a lot of cartoons with the woman threatening somebody with a hat pin. Okay, so the hat pin holders started to be made and everything popular, so that is carnival glass. And the glass hat pins that went with it. This has a spider on it. And amber was a very popular color. Let's have some other amber ones. Sometimes to kind of answer your question, Shireen, was did they do it without pins? They did 3 and 4 pins at a time sometimes. And here is an example of a pair. So you could get a matched pair. Now these are kind of unique because they have little hinges on them, so you could wear them that way, or you could wear them straight. And these are enameled. These are enameled underneath. So they were. Now every good jewelry maker in the world at that time made hat pins. Lalique made hat pins, Fabergé, Tiffany, all the big names made them. The reason why we don't see them is because they were in gold and precious stones. And what happened was that when hat pins, finally in the 20th century, hats got smaller during World War I, which everything gets conservative usually during a war. And so the big extravagance went down very small. They didn't need hat pins anymore. And the people that had these expensive hat pins take them to the jeweler. If they had a small pair, they could make them into earrings or pendants or something that was more useful because they were in gold and precious stones. So there aren't very many around. And I have seen in books some of Lalique, and but all the big artists did, if they made jewelry, they made hat pins. We just don't have a real good museum or leftovers from that because they wanted to utilize, they wanted to use it. So, which is understandable. Here's another example of a sword, which is, like I said, believed to be the first hat pins. Now, they did not only holders, they did other little designer things. This is an oak box with silver. It says hat pins in script on it, and then inside is, so you kept a good set in here. And here's a decent set of small ones. You can come up and take a look later. But this is another pair. And
what's at the top of those?
These are, I think they're just gold filled and garnets.
Oh, okay.
And they were big on stones representing things. The suffragettes used amethyst as their stone because it was believed to cure alcoholism. And then, of course, everybody liked their birthstone, just like we do. And so they made them like that. They got pretty elaborate with the fancy. And then they went into stands. not just, in fact, I didn't even, this is the only stand-up holder like that I brought. The China ones you see are a dime a dozen. They make reproductions. I didn't even bother with those. Everybody's seen those. But the stands are a little, I like the stands. And you can see how elaborate they got with that. Also, more elaborate pin cushions. When you run across these, if they don't have the pin cushions still in them, that's what they were for. And they were good and sturdy, so they could handle. Then, this one is a pig. They got kind of fanciful with them. And this one, like I said, the amethyst was very popular at the time. And so this one is I have a Scottish thistle hat pin that goes in there. So that kind of matches. And they did that, see? Like I said, they made them out of every kind of material that was popular at the time. China, enamel. One thing that was very popular, if you're a collector, is Satsuma. They made Satsuma hat pins.
What is it made out of?
China. It's China, and it's made in China. And it was, you'll see a lot of Satsuma around in jardinières and pots and things like that. But they also made hat pins.
What is that metal?
The metal is generally base metal. Now, I've run across dealers that said that when they've had the rare 14 karat gold pin, that they thought the whole pin was gold. It never was. It's only the end. This has to be strong, and it needs to be out of steel, or sometimes they're sterling all the way down, but sterling is tough. It's strong. So it's never a precious metal from the head down, never. Now, the way you can tell a reproduction, and there's lots of reproductions out there, a lot of people make them, they use pretty beads and stuff like that, but the way that you tell, and you can look at this when you come up after the class too, there is a little finding at the base of a hat pin that is unique. I've seen reproductions try to reproduce this look with a bead, but it is all one piece. Not every single hat pin has this, but that's if you're in doubt and it doesn't have that, then you know, it's up to you to determine if it's antique or not. But the antique ones have this little binding underneath.
You're calling it a binding?
Finding, well, I don't know what else to call it. Huh?
Are you using V?
No, F. Finding, like jewelry finding.
Okay. Is it like a bead or?
It's like, I don't know, I shouldn't move away from here. Take a look at it when we're done, and you'll see that on that one, this one, the same. They did them the same. So you can take a look at that. Then you'll know. Another thing was this cage kind of effect. That is authentic. A lot of people take old pins and try to turn them into hat pins. I'm a purist. I like only the real deal, the real hat pin. And so we have more glitz, and they were very popular. They shouldn't be the most expensive because it's just rhinestones. It takes a lot more to design something like this. This is a cameo and real pearls around it. So they did very classy things like this. And I'll put that in this one. Let's see, I think the longest one that I have is almost 14 inches which is this one. So you can see as it went through the hat and this stuck out the other end, that was very dangerous. And they passed laws that they had to have a little protective end on them if they were over 12 inches. 12 inches or over was the law. You could have them shorter and not have to have the nib on the end, but the long ones they did because they were a hazard. They were dangerous. You can see how. Oh, and again, the purple stone, which was so popular. Okay, and then we had, there were china painted ones. This is a portrait. So just like you've seen probably the antique brooches, they did that as well. And it has the right finding on the other side. They didn't always do the same underneath. Some were solid, some were open, just depended on the jeweler. And sometimes you could buy buy the glass hat pin head at the 5 and dime and pick your length. And you took it home and you glued it. And they had really good glue in those days, made out of horses' hooves that really was good. And so when you see, this is not a button. This has a shaft and a shank on it, and that indicates that this is a glass hat pin, not a button.
So they did sell them individually?
They did, in your 5 and 10. At Woolworth, 5 and 10. You could find the heads and the pins the size of your choice. Excuse me. Then there was because of the holiday thing, they got into sports. So if you were at a cricket match, here were some cricket bats, and you were right in with the camaraderie of it. And then if you were a golfer, you had sterling silver golf clubs that you would wear in your hat. A hat pin for every occasion. Then, and all materials were used. Here's a goldstone one. Anything that was popular. Here's a sterling silver one. I believe this thistle one is also sterling. England did a lot of sterling. Another glitzy, just all solid rhinestones. I'm sorry?
Time period of from like when to when that
the swords were 1890s to the turn of the century, 1900, and had faded by 1915, in the middle of World War I.
How did you come across the hoof, the foot?
Well, I've been searching my whole adult life for hat pins.
Remember when you got it? Where you got it from?
No, it's all a blur.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
it's
very different. I mean, I would never even thought to use something like that.
right.
Repurposed everything.
That's right. And you might have seen the horns that hang on the wall, and they would have had a pincushion in them as well, that hung on the wall near the ladies' dressing table. So they had those. Then as they got smaller, here's, I dropped my water. Here's another really tall one. Look up, I think this one's taller than that one. But you can see, you can tell how elaborate they had, the hats were compared to what had to be created to hold them on the head. Okay, this was the Satsuma. And then here's a really pretty enamel. They did I love enamel, I just think it's wonderful. Now, there is a hat pin that I wanted to specifically point out, not to be freaked out. I know it looks like a swastika, but it's too early. It is a good luck symbol in Native American culture. That's where they stole it from. So whenever you see a swastika in what you think is a Victorian or antique piece, it means good luck, not the negative connotation that we have. Well, I'll put that one in here. And along with the 4-leaf clover pig is, oh no, it's a 3-leaf clover, is a 4-leaf clover. So on St. Patrick's Day, you have your hat pin to wear. Every occasion. Now, by the time World War I had started, things had started to get very conservative. I guess I should show you this one first before we start on that. This is what's called a vanity hat pin, and it unscrews, and it has a little powder puff inside, so they could powder their nose.
Oh my gosh, wow.
They made them with little pins, perfume, smelling salts that opened up. I've only been able to get this one. They're really rare and hard to come by. But I'll leave that open so you can see. When you come up later.
I was thinking that, like the ring, you know?
They made flowers. They liked flowers. And bugs. Flying bugs. They love those.
And they can mix and match in their hats?
Oh, yes. Yes. They did that. Here's another flying bug. And initials. They did them with initials. I have some, I couldn't find them where they were, but they were sororities, patriotic things. Here's one with mosaic, the micro mosaic that people like. Okay, so as it got down smaller, it got kind of weird. King Tut's tomb was opened in the early part of the 20th century, and Egyptian stuff was everywhere. It was a big deal. So, of course, it went into the hat pins, and they were still using them. And here's a Egyptian pin in a hat pin holder. It's made of china. And then they got kind of ridiculous. And they came up with comic bisque. There's lots of these. And the hat pins were crazy.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
They got smaller and weirder. Very weird. Very Art Deco. Here's another Egyptian one. This is all the same time frame though. And they made them out of plastic and lucite, and bakelite too, bakelite. So there is how it ended up. Started with these little swords, got crazy, made it out of everything, and then went down to this. So, is it time? Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions?
How about, did they make them like cloth with cloth or something? You know?
Yes. They made cloth. They made homemade ones. You could buy the pins in the 5 and dime. So they could create and do their own thing. I'm surprised nobody asked price.
I was going to find the cheapest to the most expensive.
Okay, the cheapest right now in today's market, fair market value, the cheapest would probably be the glass ones, these. And they were inexpensive when you bought them as well. So one of the most expensive ones that I have here on the table would be the cameo with the pearls. the more stones and the longer and the bigger, the more money. So this one would be about $75. And so would this one. And
Back then, was it affordable?
they were affordable then, because none of this is considered fine jewelry. Nothing's in gold. This is sterling, but sterling wasn't a real big deal at that time. So, any other questions? Yes.
Are they still making them today?
They are making them. They're reproductions. Some get very good. I have, with all my hat pins, sometimes I have sat and looked at one and thought, I don't know if it's now or then, because some have gotten very good because they were popular. They're not so popular right now. The next generation doesn't seem to be too interested in them. But I still think they're fascinating, and you can store a lot of them in a small space, which I like. And just to me, the designs and everything about them just really appeal to me. That's why I love them so much.
Go ahead.
Were any of the, I guess, more elite ones made with Lalique?
Oh yeah, 14 karat gold. Real stones, diamonds, yes. Diamond Lil had her share of antique hat pins that were all real, all diamonds.
So the Lalique was crystal?
Lalique was kind of an enamel. And then Fabergé looked just like you think, with the stones and the enamel and all that. Tiffany were a little plainer. They were more 14 karat with a nice design, say like this, or smaller.
Rhinestones, the one that's sticking out?
Pardon?
The one on the hook,
Yeah,
that's closer to me.
yeah, this one?
Yeah, that looks that.
They were, the ones that are the most expensive are the biggest and have the most. They used to have contests in the premier expert on hat pins in the last century was Lillian Baker. She lived in California and she started the Hat Pin Society, a national, might have been international, but she wrote books, and they used to have contests in her organization of who had the longest and who had the most rhinestones on one pin, and some of them got to be almost like 5 inches across. They were just unreal.
But they were real. They're vintage, they're old.
Old. She did do commemorative hat pin holders every year, but she was marking them very well so that you know the difference. It'll say from what year, 1978 or whatever. But the height of the collecting, I would say, was from the 80s and 90s. And then it kind of dropped off at 2000, at the turn of the century.
Crystals, are any of those?
Oh yeah, crystal, I have crystal ones. Usually those are etched with a ballerina or, a pretty,
Is it hard to find the holders for them?
these are hard to find. The regular, just the plain that go up, that are just china. And they came out with a ton of reproductions in the 70s and 80s, just tons of them. And unless they're marked well, like from England or a China company that you know of that made antique things, there's so many repros out there, lots of repros. Yes.
Do you know if there's any booths here that have hat pins?
I was looking before we started. I didn't see any.
We do. I have them marked on the map for us for the end of
Oh,
class.
great, super. And like I said, I don't think that it's wrong to make repros, because I think people still use hat pins. Most people just use a corsage pin, which is kind of unexciting, a long corsage pin. But if you have a short hat pin, you could use it if you wear hats.
They
And
can also be a conversation piece,
yes,
because I used to wear them, I used to do when I wore hats,
uh-huh.
and younger people especially, they want to know why am I wearing that in my hat.
Right,
You know, but they don't
right.
know what it is.
Well, they developed into, and that's a whole other class, into hat ornaments. And people will call them hat pins. They're really hat ornaments. They had a fancy end on both ends. They were short, and they went in the hat, and it stayed in the hat. It was an ornament. It was like a brooch for your hat. And it didn't keep it on. It didn't have anything with keeping it on. And if you remember the scene in Gone with the Wind where Rhett buys Scarlett a hat from Paris, you remember she tied it. And so it was a green velvet. It's, you know, one that they put on all the dolls and everything. And that was pretty much the end. Well, that was the 1860s, so not too much longer after that they had done away with bonnets. Only old ladies wore bonnets after a while. So they had to have something to keep it on. This is probably one of the most expensive hat pin holders I have here because they're getting scarce. There is a repro out, but it's a really ugly one, and you'd be able to recognize it right away. They made them in the purple and the red and the amber, or the gold. And these are pretty common. You can find the hoof thing pretty easily. Shell ones, they're a little harder to find. The shoes are pretty easy. This I consider one of my prized possessions. I actually went into a nautical store in Newport Beach, and I walked in and I saw all this nautical stuff, and I said, "Oh, you don't have what I need. I'm looking for hat pins." He goes, "Wait a minute." So he went to the back and brought this out. So it pays to ask. Yeah. It really pays to ask. And I was so thrilled with it because it's not common at all. Yeah. So, any other questions?
Oh, I don't know what they're called. The busts of the girls.
Yes. Yes.
Those are very collectible. Do you have
Those were vases. They have to have holes in them in order to be a hat pin holder. And usually they're solid on the bottom. That's how you know that they're not vases. Is they're solid on the bottom with lots of holes. And people will try to use salt shakers and stuff like that as hat pins. A hat pin holder is 4 inches or taller. So little ones don't work. You couldn't hold a hat pin in it. And I see on eBay all the time people trying to pass off sugar shakers and different things like that. It didn't unscrew. It didn't, it wasn't a vase. The open mouth ones that you see are still in controversy. They think they really kept toothbrushes in them instead of hat pins. But they could have used it for both. But they look better when they're spread out with the individual holes and stuff. So, okay. Any more questions? Okay. Thank you. Look.
I thought of the jewel. I didn't even know that. I was taking down that. I know. I'm so fascinated.
And then hair pieces and then a hat.
I know. I didn't see how I should complain.
Yes. Take a look at that. That little piece under there. That little lump there. And I haven't. No, it's soldered. Soldered. Mm-hmm.
I have mine in a little Victorian boot.
Oh, yes.
I have mine there. I have about 6 or 7 of them.
Right. Right.
I tried to find, I was going to make hat pins
Oh, were
for
you?
some reason. But you can't find these.